So to get us started, I have a Shakespearean sonnet here that I found, and I guess Ken will be able to tell us whether it is within the bounds of what he's here to talk about, or whether it's just a very nice sonnet. So, as an unperfect actor on the stage, who with his fear is put beside his part, or some fierce thing replete with too much rage, whose strength's abundance weakens his own heart, so I, for fear of trust, forget to say the perfect ceremony of love's rite, and in mine own love's strength seem to decay, or charged with burden of mine one love's might. Oh, let my books be then the eloquence and dumb presagers of my speaking breast, who plead for love and look for recompense, more than that tongue that more hath more expressed. Oh, learn to read what silent love hath writ, to hear with eyes belongs to love's fine writ. So I as someone who am often feel more comfortable expressing myself in writing than in speaking, can relate to that, that sentiment. So Ken, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and I hope that we can all have a great conversation together.
Great, thank you. And Marian, and first, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm glad to hear you describe this as a conversation, because I truly would like it to be that. So in response to the poem, what that poem is, I think, talking about is the discovery of honest interaction. What is, what's written upon our hearts, and how does that get expressed? And I have been an actor for many, many years, and became a member of Actors Equity in 1988. So that's a very long time. I've taught hundreds of students, of acting students, and so what I really wanted to talk about exactly that point today, and that is how do we as actors move to, or move from, a place of authenticity, and then how does that learning, how do the techniques surrounding that authenticity show up in our lives? How are we informed by the study of the craft as human beings? And so in the most simplistic terms, and this sounds so simple and is incredibly difficult, the actor begins by examining and deciding upon an objective. So that answers the question, what do I want? As in an arc across an entire play or musical, any kind of piece of theater, what is the journey of this person, and what do they want across that whole narrative? Then that same approach gets segmented by scene. What do I want in scene 1? What do I want in scene 2? And how do all of those scene objectives support that overarching, or it's actually called the super objective, of the character's journey through the whole play? So we have the super objective across the whole play, the objective within each scene. Underlying all of that is intention. So the objective is the what, the intention is the why. Why is this thing important for me to obtain? Why do I want what I want? And again, usually because intention speaks to values, usually intention is more connected to a super objective than an scene by scene objective. And then the next layer down, and this is where it gets very interesting from an acting perspective, is action. What action am I willing to take in any moment in the play to achieve the objective in the scene, therefore leading to the super objective of the narrative? So the layers are super objective and intention, and then within each scene objective, and then within each moment of each scene is action. So when you are teaching people who are new to acting, and so right now you should know I'm teaching an acting class in the theater department at Towson University. And it is so fascinating to me, after being at the Arts Council for the last 4 years and before that at the State Department of Education. So I've been out of teaching for about 8 years, that I walked into this brand new group of students who have the exact same struggles as the acting students I've taught for the past 40 years, right? And that is, interestingly, this notion that acting is about emotion. And the truth is, not one of us wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'll be mad today, right? Or I think I'll be happy today. We wake up in the morning and say to ourselves, I want to accomplish this thing. And our success in accomplishing that thing, or lack of success in accomplishing that thing, results in emotion, right? We may feel joy or elation because we're getting what we want, or frustration or anger because we're not getting what we want, or fear, or any of those things. But I keep wanting to use the word young, and that's not the right word. New actors of any age think that acting is about putting on or pretending to experience an emotion that may not be theirs. And that leads to a lack of authenticity. So what I've noticed in my own life because of this work is that if I walk into any situation, I have values that are connected to my intention. And the values that I have decided upon and have informed the way I am in the world for many years are generosity and joy. In every interaction, that's sort of my benchmark. I try to show up as my most generous and most joyful self. That's always my intention. And that allows me then to be present, so that when I'm interacting with someone, I can help them clarify what they want in the interaction. What is your objective in this moment with me? I'm here with you, you're here with me. What is it that we want from each other? And how can we help each other get to achieving that objective? So I'm going to pause there, because I thought about it, an example that we all may be familiar with from theater, but I want to pause there to open up to comments or questions.
So many. And go. I think you have looked like you have something to say.
I love that way of looking at things. Like, we've had some challenges lately. We just moved. We have a new house. The new house has all these issues. And I wake up every day with this list of things that I'm never going to accomplish. And then I do. I have all these emotions that Mariah hears about. And my daughter is a senior in high school. She's taking acting. She's a new actor. She's very interested in this. And thinking about her and portraying characters, and then thinking about our life and like what I want to portray and get out of my day and share with others, and what in reality I'm actually sharing with others, which is a lot of just blah, blah, blah lately. This has just given me a lot to kind of think about. Like, maybe it's kind of like meditating, like you start your day with that intention, and I'm feeling like I need to go back to that. And there's a reason why that is important, and to not let those emotions drive you. So thank you. You've already helped me.
No, good.
Generosity.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the next phase. I'm not an actor, but my background is in theater, and I've studied theater a lot. And I love this framing, because you're exactly right. People come to theater thinking it's about the emotion. And of course, that's how we connect, right? With what's happening on stage. And in my opinion, that's what art is about, is kind of evoking and expressing emotions. But it doesn't start, that's just the top layer, right? So
That's the
thank you.
result. Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in how you work with a brand new college student who probably has been in high school productions, think they know how to act, and then come to this with the expectation that they're going to don a robe that's going to transform them into a character. How do you deal with that in a nice, friendly, smiling way, the way you seem to be able to speak?
What an extraordinary question. So as a young, I remember this as a young actor myself. I thought that that acting was about finding the differences between who I was and the character I was portraying and stepping into those differences. That is actually the opposite of what's true. A successful performance is finding the similarities between who I am as myself, because that's all I got. That's who's going to be on the stage, not anybody else, just me. So how do I find the similarities between who I am and how I would respond in a situation dictated by a script? And that sounds so simplistic, and it's the most difficult thing in the world, because it requires, first of all, moving your ego out of the way and figuring out, how would I, as Ken, respond in this situation honestly? What would be my response? But so that brings in a layer of a old Stanislavski term, given circumstances. How do the circumstances dictated by the script influence the behavior of this character? And by behavior, now we get into action. So I want to give an example of that. I don't remember now what year. I was cast in a long run of as Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. And I wanted to bring up this example because most people are familiar with this show and with this particular character's narrative arc. And there's a very beautiful moment in the show between Tevye and his wife Golda. And they sing this duet, "Do You Love Me?" And I use that as an example because Tevye's objective is the title of the song, right? He wants to know in that scene with Golda, does she love him? And he uses many actions throughout the song. He teases her, he cajoles her, he sort of flirts with her. And then there's this beautiful bridge in the song where he actually gently confronts her, and he sings, "The first time I met you was on our wedding day. I was scared." She says, "I was shy." He says, "I was nervous." She says, "So was I." And he says, "But my father and my mother said we'd learn to love each other. And now I'm asking Golda, do you love me?" So in that very simple moment in the song, he steps beyond that kind of little bit of teasing and cajoling they had in the first two verses and pushes her toward an honest answer. And then, of course, at the end of the song, he gets what he wants, which is he knows that she loves him. And she makes a discovery in that song, and that is that she loves him. So that's a very long-winded answer to the question of approaching how I approach a young student. And the approach with new actors is to validate who they are as human beings and to value their experiences and to value how those experiences inform the actions that they're choosing. A good director will come into a space with an actor of any age and say, you know, okay, we are agreed upon this actor's trying to achieve this objective in this scene. What actions do you, actor, think you're playing on this line or this line or this line? And the director will say, after experiencing the actor playing that, try this action here and maybe this action here, because I think it helps clarify your character's journey. That's really the job of the director, is to pull out, to receive what the actor's bringing, and then to just help guide them gently to the clearer vision of the overall scene and therefore production. You'll notice, and I so wish we had more time, because I would love to pull up some scenes to show you differences. You'll notice particularly, and you know, now there's this, not now, for a dozen years now, there's been a trend on Broadway to cast Hollywood actors because it's bigger ticket sales, right? You often see, if you're paying attention, and well, it doesn't matter if you're paying attention. You'll often feel when you watch a non-theater trained actor, this person doesn't feel, something's not right. They don't fit in the show somehow. Somewhere in our subconscious, you sense that something about this isn't quite right. And usually what that is that person, because of the power dynamic, they're bringing their name to the role, not necessarily training. They're bringing their name to the role, and the director has been put in the position to not be able to guide them into the vision of the show. So they're doing, you know, what they think is really great work, but the director is not able to, as I just described with new actors, sort of, you know, finesse their choices to align with the larger vision of the show. So, sorry, that was a whole lot of information, but the way into a new actor is to validate who they are and to value their experience and to encourage them to use their experience to make those initial choices.
I have to admit that my daughter is the chair of a department of theater and dance in a university, and many of the students now are coming with a full load of baggage.
Yeah.
That I don't think they even understand. Can you get beyond that?
Yeah, this semester, and in addition to the fact that these students are back in person for the first time, a complicating factor as actors is they're back in person as a first time, still masked the entire time. So we are engaging each other without being able to see our faces. They don't know me, I don't know them. They may know each other from 2 years ago, but most of them don't, because they haven't been in class together for more than a year. So this particular course, and I was very clear with the department chair about this when she asked me to teach it. This semester is about healing. It is about holding the space to allow people to heal. And, you know, we are fortunate that we have theater to find our way to each other, to find our way back to communication, because we haven't had it in so long. This is a rough time, without question.
I would imagine also that as with all of, I mean, so one of the things I've found in, as we've begun having exhibitions again in our gallery, that some of the artists who have, you know, regularly submitted for years, their work has changed a lot in the last year and a half. And they're submitting, in some cases, what I find much more interesting work than maybe before. But I think all of us are different people than we were. And I would imagine that, especially for young people, but for any actor, would complicate that question of who am I and what are the overlaps between myself and this character?
Yeah, and what do I want? That's difficult for any, because we've been socialized, most of us, I would say, many of us have been socialized out of stating what we want. Because we want to be polite, we want to be inclusive, we want to honor other people's feelings, whatever that is. And so we're often socialized out of stating that. And so now to ask young people, these young people in this class, what they want in this very uncertain time, it is a hotbed of conversation.
One thing I was thinking when you were talking about healing, I'd love how you work, to hear about how you work with that. And just as a, talking about, I have a grandson who is now 13, and he was in a theater production in Seattle as a younger child. He loved his theater, and the pandemic rolled along. And he kept going, doing virtual things, which he hated, doing virtual things. And now, I've talked to him, I'm just not sure he's going to return to it. And he's young, it's very difficult. I think he thought this would be his life. Of course, a lot of young people do.
Mm-hmm. And I have to admit that live in-person interaction, if that is something that feeds you, that fuels your soul, your heart, that I can imagine for him that doing it virtually obviously does not bring the same kind of joy and reward. And then now a gap exists between what he knew and what he could maybe step back into someday. I have to admit that was a big factor for me stepping away from the State Arts Council. The great joy of that job for me was being in my car and traveling across the state and chatting with all of you. It was a true one of the top joys of my life. And that balanced the struggles of budgets and administrative work and assignments from the secretary or the governor. All of those difficult things always were balanced by being in communities, having conversations, and seeing the brilliant work that was going on. So when that stopped happening and the other stuff increased exponentially, last February, I had this real, moment of circling back to my values and realizing that when I can be in the place of generosity and joy, I say that I'm in my center. I am centered. I could not get back there because I was hearing, as we all were, one devastating story after another. Thousands, literally thousands of them, reading one grant application after another. That was, I had a documentarian interview me, and he said, I have interviewed for different projects many government officials. You seem to have a level of compassion that is unlike other government officials I've met. And I think that someone who is not an artist or did not experience what it is to run a nonprofit, to perform regularly, to do the work, could have continued on. But frankly, just as you're describing with your grandson, that lack of balance that he's missing from the in-person interaction took an emotional toll on me that I had to acknowledge. And so like him, I'm so glad you shared that, because like him, I'm, finding my way back through teaching, even in masks, through teaching, through master classes, through other creative activities. But I hear that, and I think it's so wise of you to acknowledge him in where he is on his journey, and to support him hopefully returning someday.
Well, I really do. So we'll see what I can do.
Yeah.
It's,
Thank
I'm
you,
sure,
Ken.
complicated by the difference between being 11 and being 13, when, you know, you are still learning who you are, and many people's interests and passions change naturally, even without, you know, the intervening sort of disruption that we've had.
Mariah, I'm still learning who I am at 60.
As am I. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and especially now, right? I mean,
Right.
I think, you know, I mean, I can certainly relate to what you're talking about that toll that this time has taken, and the difficulty in remaining connected to, you know, who I was before and what I believed in and felt and understood about the world and the other people around me. And you know, I don't know anybody who hasn't had, whether they know it or not, maybe hasn't had paid that kind of a price.
If you haven't
Sorry.
learned who you are, if you don't keep learning who you are, you stop growing.
Yes. Yes. And what's you know, one of the millions of things that are unprecedented in this time is the lack of we were all, before the global pandemic, able to depend upon folks, I don't know how to say this, before us, above us, something at some other level of leadership for guidance. We were all thrown into something, them included,
That's right.
that they never experienced.
Mhm.
And so the support mechanisms for any of us just fell away because no one knew any answers to anything. And depending upon, you know, your role in any of this, that was easier or more difficult to navigate without a net.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've read about, you know, the record enormous numbers of elected officials, especially mayors, who are either not running for re-election, or who are actually resigning, stepping away. And I think that you know, that lack of a roadmap, there's, you know, nobody had a roadmap, and
Right.
you had to make, we still are all making it up, you know. I mean, who would have thought that in month 20 whatever we are of this pandemic, that we would still be making it up every day or every week? You know, it's really a lot. So
And
you know,
I hope that you are giving yourselves grace and breath around that, because it's so necessary. It's so necessary to just be easy and not think, because the expectation is that business as usual will continue. Oh, and by the way, we're also dealing with a global pandemic. Right? It's absurd. And and as creative people, we're all about problem solving. So, you know, I saw the whole arc happen of, you know, let's dive in. And I was leading the charge. Let's dive in. Let's use our creative skills to problem solve. And you could sense, you know, everybody was willing to do that. We reached this peak, and so many innovative ideas came from it, and so many creative responses. And then I saw it happen right in front of my eyes every Tuesday morning. It was not sustainable. Right? By the beginning of summer, folks were exhausted. And so I hope that you're all taking care of yourselves, for sure.
Thank
yeah,
you, Ken.
I couldn't agree more, Ken. And I think, you know, that's true for people in the arts and people, you know, I mean, my God, educators and I mean, anybody. But yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for your honesty and sharing your journey through this, because it takes a lot to share that and be vulnerable, and for us to see somebody with your experience grapple with these same questions that, whether we're a young teen or at any age, like, trying to figure all this out is not easy. And I mean, I think this is the first salon that I've got a little teary-eyed, and I don't think I was the only one. So I was like, it helps. And we appreciate you reminding us about grace. And, as you were talking, I was thinking about all the things that, like, at the beginning of the pandemic, I felt energized because I felt like this is an opportunity to provide some new things. We have to do these new things as RiverArts, and oh my gosh, we could provide, we could do salons, we could provide themed art kits. There's all these things we could do, and then you're right, after a while, you just add and add and add, and everybody wants everything that we used to do in person, plus all these new things, and then after a while, nobody wants any of it because, I mean, seriously, we're still struggling with, like, do we continue these salons? I'm so glad we did today because this has been healing and really nice for us. But at the same time, we struggle, like, okay, have we been doing this for too long? Are people Zoom fatigued? Are they tired of intimate conversations? And, everybody just wants to be back in the gallery, and we do too. But it's hard to make sense of it all. And it helps to know that maybe we're not the only ones still struggling to figure out how to do all these great new things, and all the old stuff we did, but in a new way, and new things we haven't even thought of yet. So.
Yeah, no, I hear that, Ann, and I'll share with you. So my house faces Patterson Park, which is one of the largest parks in Baltimore City. Yeah. And to walk around the park takes about 45 minutes. So it's pretty substantial. And so one day, and it was cold. So I'm going to say it was the end of January, beginning of February. I was out for a walk and really grappling with my own fatigue and exhaustion and the desire I had to keep cheerleading everyone on. That was always at the forefront of my mind. And I had one of those moments in life, and I thought, if someone you didn't even know very well came to you and described this situation you're in, what would your advice to them be? And can you love yourself as much as you could care for someone you don't even know very well? And it was this real moment for me of, well, it's that, what's the thing they say on the airplane, that you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself before somebody else? It was that moment. And I realized that I would be a terrible model for anyone if I don't begin to take action, going back to acting, take action to shore up the Arts Council so that I can leave it in good hands and move to whatever comes next for me. Because that's what we're about the arts. This should be joyful, right? And instead, as you're describing, I hear it, and it was more like, I don't know what, running some Olympic marathon. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I only started in this role a few months before the pandemic started, so that was great timing. And I remember, when in those first few months when we were all blissfully looking towards a very different future than we ended up getting, I kind of had a mantra, and I would say to the staff, we're not running an ER. There's no such thing as an arts emergency. Like, everybody, it's all going to be okay. We can do what we do, and it's all going to be okay. And then lo and behold, here we have what sort of did feel like an arts emergency.
Like an arts emergency, yeah.
And so, I guess that'll teach me to make pronouncements. But who would have known, and who could have been prepared? Nobody could have. And so how can I think, going back to that action question and the values that actions come from, how can we act on our values in what is an emergency without, in a sustainable way, when the emergency is months or years in duration? And, that's a question that your students, I'm sure, are struggling with, and Mary, that I'm sure your grandson is struggling with, maybe, on a a level that he wouldn't maybe articulate it that way, but you know, we all are.
And I've never considered an action item in any way an action of self-care. I mean, I've always been good at eating well and taking walks and meditating. Journaling. I've always done that stuff. It never felt like self-care to me, though. It just felt like the day. And suddenly, it is very important for me to define it as self-care and to expand what that means, to find more time and space. And to your point, Mariah, to say, even though it does feel like it, this is truly not an emergency. No one is bleeding.
Exactly. Yeah.
There was times though that it felt like the arts were the only thing that could help people. And so even though, you know, we're reacting to this emergency, but it felt like we had something. It's sometimes the only thing people had to interact when everybody's stuck at home. There's a way to reach out, and whether it's through singing on balconies or performances on Zoom or collaborative art projects where everybody goes and, you know, chalks the sidewalk or, you know, contributes something to a tree downtown, like those things became even more meaningful than I already found them. And, you know, it was the one way to pull people together. So suddenly, like, our job felt like even more important.
Yeah.
And but then how do you sustain all that? I was wondering, so Patterson Park is right there by Creative Alliance in Baltimore.
That's
Is that right?
right. Creative Alliance is a block and a half from my house.
I love that place. And
Lucky
I
you.
visited and I get their emails, and Mariah knows I regularly forward like, oh my gosh, look at this. And I have called them and I have talked about their paper mache kit. And I've been like, this is so cool. How can we do something similar? And, you know, we've actually partnered with a couple things that haven't necessarily come to fruition, but we offered like the paper mache piñatas, and they were going to do it on Zoom with us. And we didn't get anybody to sign up, but, you know, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And I think that they had a lot of wonderful creative ideas too. And it was really fun to see what other arts organizations were doing during this time and continue to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think that that is a way that even through our masks and through our screens, we have, as a sort of global population, grown through this, you know, by necessity, sharing those ideas and connecting and collaborating with other people and organizations going through the same thing, and in just as sort of blind and groping a way. You know, I've really valued that. And Ken, you know, what you were doing with the Tuesday mornings was, even though I wasn't able to make it as often as I wanted to, it was absolutely invaluable for the resources that you provided, but even more for the connections and just even seeing the other people facing the same thing, even if I never talked to them.
Yeah.
It helped so much.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Really, I can't tell you. I mean, the Arts Council has really proven their worth to the state of Maryland and to artists and to organizations like ours. You know, I can't imagine how anybody would have been able to maintain a life in the arts without those resources and connections over the past few years.
That's lovely to hear. Thank you.
And all the important moments you helped us face. You know, it was not just the pandemic, but way before the pandemic and other events of 2020, you all were pushing your grantees and communities to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion so much more. And, you know, we've, I really think that so much of what you did there really made an impact on us. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
And I know we're really at 5:45. I don't know, in the other ladies, do you have any questions for Ken before we go? I do want to ask him about, like, unless it's a cheesy question about like favorite theater roles, because I just love hearing about that. But are there any other questions for Ken?
I just wonder if you've seen an upside to this whole lockdown pandemic. And I would cite my daughter's theater arts department that mounted the Glass Menagerie on internet. And it was absolutely the most professional looking production. And along with it, their department was able to acquire new equipment and get instructions that they never, ever would have been able to fund in the past. Have you seen this sort of upside?
Through all across the nation, and definitely across Maryland. As Anne and Mariah have described, the shifting programming as it was to programming as it needs to be to respond to communities I cannot tell you. I mean, there were times that I would hear ideas and just be moved to tears. I couldn't, and to Mariah's earlier point, so not only within organizations, but across organizations, folks who would have never probably ever worked together suddenly found themselves together in a Zoom meeting somewhere and started a conversation that resulted in collaborative projects, the likes of which we had never seen. I never could have imagined it. Artists suddenly from the Eastern Shore in Maryland, I'm being specific there, artists from the Eastern Shore connecting with artists in the mountains. I mean, that kind of thing, our state is magnificent in its diverse terrain. But and believe me, as someone who has driven across it many, many, many times, it's not easy for folks to come down. It's 3 hours from McHenry, Maryland, Deep Creek Lake, just to Baltimore, right? Another 2 hours to visit you all. Yeah. And suddenly those kinds of connections and collaborations were happening, and not just one or two, many, many, many. So I actually think there were many upsides. So I hope, my hope is that we're moving into a time where we can begin to come back to in-person exchange, because as wonderful as this is, there is nothing that will ever replace being in a room with another human being. We cannot, there's nothing that will replace that. So yes, I think there were many, many upsides to it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And in these salons, which are, in my view, an upside for us, I think we wouldn't have done them otherwise. And, they've certainly given me enormous value, but I think to our community as well. And we collaborated for a month with an environmental organization, which is not something we would probably have otherwise done. And it was wonderful. So I totally agree. It's been, a time when we had to connect and collaborate with other organizations, which I think, would have been valuable anyway, and we wouldn't have done. Yeah. So thank you, Ken, and thank you, Mickey and Mary, for coming and having this intimate conversation. I really have enjoyed it. And we always, we try to keep it short so that people don't get too much Zoom fatigue, and it's nice to leave people wanting more, but I do always, wish that we could have more time.
Yeah, there's so much I'd love to hear about all of your breadth of experience, Ken, but maybe we'll save that for another conversation, because
but Anne, you wanted to ask about favorite roles, right?
Oh, I know, but if Ken doesn't mind, but I can always email him that later.
Yeah, just quickly, I would say that top of the heap for me is Archibald in The Secret Garden.
Oh,
he's the father of the boy and the uncle to Mary, and I just a big discovery I made when I moved to New York is that I am not a long run performer. I was cast in a show that had about 120 performances, and then right at about performance number 100, I needed something else to do. That was a big light bulb moment for me, but a role like Archibald, I could have performed for many, many, many more shows than I did. So that's a favorite role. And I would love to come and chat, come there in person and chat. Always I'm available for this, but this would be a fun thing to do in person as well.
It absolutely would. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and your enthusiasm and generosity and your heart with us today. That really means a lot. And, you know, I was going to say, we always end with a toast. I finished my tea, but I've got my water still. And I think
I
we
have my
should
water
toast.
too.
All right. Toast to intention and living our values. I think that's something that we all will keep in mind, and I will take going forward from talking with you today. So thank you, Ken.
Here, here. Thank you all
Cheers.
so much. Have a
Thank
lovely
Thank you.